What is up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Do you ever wonder, about your value, your self-worth, your worth, what these things mean? Well, I do too, and I think Randy does. And today we're going to talk about this. What is your real worth? Real being, I think, that the important word there. And
Yeah.
so this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Dave here with Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yeah, Danny. So I
Yeah,
was thinking about this one this week because for
I was
anybody
going to
who
ask.
pays attention to like the stock market or anything like that, it's down pretty far over the past year. And I was looking, one of the practices that I have of kind of tracking my monetary net worth over time is just basically looking at it on a regular basis every few months, kind of track where I am. And I was doing that and I was like, wow, I'm worth the least I've been in quite a long time. And then I caught myself in that moment and been like, hang on, that is not true. Like maybe financially, I'm worth the least I have been in a while. But like when I take a look at myself, how the skills that I have now, the attitudes that I have now, the practices that I have now, compared with where I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it's like I'm literally the most valuable I've ever been.
Yeah, that's important actually, because it's funny. I think when you look at like the stock market and stuff, it obviously like it ballooned over the past. I mean, everything was going like gangbusters, right after the pandemic and stuff. It was insane. I mean, there was so much money getting thrown around that like it can't last. But you also know it's funny. Like I remember right before this is a good example is right before the pandemic, when everything tanked, my 401k tanked like completely, right? Because like everything lost like 50% or more value. And when I looked at it, I was like, whatever, it'll come back. I know it'll bounce back. Like it'll come back to like at least where it was. It might basically put me off for like a year. Who cares? It's not the end of the world. I'm not going to rush into selling anything or anything because and I didn't, and it bounced back, no problem. But I think if you look at that as your real worth, you get into this pickle too, where you start thinking like, I got to get rid of it. I got to do this. I got to do that to try and gain that wealth back up in a time when maybe you can't. It can be like really problematic from a financial perspective. But like you said too, like, it's also that's only one aspect of what you basically have, but not your worth. When we talk about where that's your finances, that's not your actual like worth as a person. And I think that's
Yeah.
super important and a mistake we make all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a common one. I think especially for young men because we think we're supposed to like really achieve and everything, our whole value as a human being is attached to how much we can produce. And it's kind of funny because while maybe it works for some people, I haven't seen a lot of examples of very wealthy people who are enjoying life. There's very
Yeah.
few examples of them. And like I look back to the best times I've had in my life, and very rarely was it because of money or something that I was doing. It was like I was enjoying the people that I was with. I was enjoying being outdoors. Like I enjoyed how I worked really hard for something for a long time and finally
Yeah.
got it. Like it wasn't about a monetary number. And I think especially now with like the stock market down, a lot of people are down on themselves. Maybe they even like have lost money in it, and it's just like, yeah, it's gonna suck for a while, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that much. Like who was that Stoic philosopher who lost everything in a shipwreck and then came to
Zeno,
start Stoicism? Yeah.
I think it was.
So
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
so basically, like Stoicism started because a guy lost everything he had in a shipwreck, and then just started talking in
And was
Rome.
literally in a place that he was unfamiliar with too. So not only did he lose everything, he wasn't like home. And back
Mhm.
then, it wasn't like it was like easy to get back either. Like nobody could like Western Union him money so he could take like a plane back home or anything. Like it wasn't a more or less simple process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
we're in
funny you
it.
mentioned that.
Oh,
I
go
just
for it.
I was watching the thing yesterday on TV. I think it was on like Discovery or something, but they're talking about feather dusters and like this place in South Africa where it's like a farm where they have all these ostriches and like they make these like real ostrich feather dusters, whatever. And the one guy they interviewed, he makes them, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm fifth generation, and I love my job." And I was just like, ha, it's like so funny because we think of like, we think of success as like having all this money, a huge house and stuff. And this guy clearly didn't have a lot, but he was also clearly happy doing what he was doing, very good at it. I think that sometimes is important too, like being very good at what you're doing, you know? And it was just interesting to see because the contrast to what we think of as like necessary for happiness and what's probably actually necessary for happiness, the real, what's really important.
Yeah. Like I it's definitely an interesting time that we're living in because you you can see examples of like all different types of people because everybody's signaling now on social media and divulging way
Oh,
too
yeah,
much information about themselves online. But like
constantly.
I noticed that the really like especially the younger rich people, they just get off on showing, oh, here's my $400,000 car, here's this giant diamond that I have, here's this other thing that I have, here's this, I just bought $1 million watch. And it's like, yeah, cool, you got a whole bunch of likes. And I know a lot of people will probably interpret this like I'm sounding envious of it, but it's I have like I have a watch that I got as a gift, and that thing works perfectly fine. You know, $1 million more for a watch isn't going to make it any better. And I have my favorite car that I ever bought was a $3,000 car, and it runs like a champ. And a $400,000 car can't be that much better.
Well, it's funny too, though. I think it's a lot of trying to validate yourself through things, first of all. But I think it's also because I think, there's this problem where like, we're constantly bombarded with images of people who, I mean, basically, what do we focus on in the Western media and news is people with a lot of money. That's it. And they're seen as, they're immediately branded as success, whether they're happy or not, whether their life is good or not. It doesn't matter just because they're a business success or a financial success. But it's like that's only one aspect. Like, when you look at like the good life, like Aristotle meant having a successful life, which was a broad term. It wasn't just having money, because that isn't everything. That doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you a good person. It doesn't make you have integrity. It does, none of these other things that require you to do stuff, right? And I think it's money's very easy. If you can get it, you can show it off. It's very easy to pretend like there's something there. But at the end of the day, the question is whether it's just empty or not. And I think that's where real worth becomes so important because, like, what's really under there.
Yeah. So if we look on the other end of the spectrum, there's this one guy who I like to listen to his stuff called Alex Hormozy because he's gone
Yeah,
broke a
yeah.
couple times and now he's made hundreds of millions of dollars. And while that's success, he also embodies like a virtuous person.
Yeah.
He's not just I make money and I'm going to show it off. He's like, I'm struggling with stuff in life and here's the lessons that I've learned. Here's what I'm struggling with and here's where I'm trying to go. And so I admire that in him being honest about it. But one thing that he was saying in a video I was watching and also in something that I sent you was that like skills are really, really important. Like everybody wants to accumulate money, but accumulating skills is way more important because the government can't take that away from you. A woman you divorce or a man you divorce can't take that away from you. Like your skills you'll have forever. And it's just the accumulation of that. And then like that's why he says like many uh entrepreneurs are able to bounce back because they lose it a time or two. That's a learning lesson. As long as they're persistent, as long as they keep going, they can continue to bounce back.
Well, that's just it. If you have the experience, you have the wisdom, the knowledge, the know-how, and the skill set to do what you want. I mean, I think you're right. I think like in other words, like, investing in ourselves, building ourselves is the most important thing because nobody can take it away. And no matter what happens, you always have that. It's a resource that you can always pull on. And the great thing about skills and stuff is a lot of times it doesn't require you to have anything else. You can put it to use, right? Like you can always go like, you'll always be able to go get a job if you have to. You'll always be able to start something new. You'll always be able to do something different. And I think, that's why a lot of times when people like win the lottery, we talked about this before, right? They go bankrupt because they don't know how to manage the money. They blow it. They don't feel like it's earned anyway. So it feels like this like windfall that they just spend, egregiously. And then it's like, they run out of it and then they don't know how to get it back because they didn't really, it was just random chance that they got it in the first place, right? It's like, so, I
Mhm.
mean, that's what happens.
Yeah. I want to go back and touch on something you were talking about earlier. So like the fifth generation ostrich feather farmer. So like it seems so foreign for someone in the US to be like, how could you enjoy that job? You're not a lawyer, you're not a doctor, you're not like,
Yeah.
it's like you don't drive a Porsche, you don't all this stuff. But it's like he just enjoys going to work. Like I sometimes I fantasize
On the
about
side
like
too, the weather also looked awesome. I mean,
mm,
and the farm was beautiful. So I mean, it's like there's that, right? It's like it's funny when you I was gonna say too, I think the people I probably envied most too is like, those monks that live in like those sweet temples, like the Zen Buddhists and stuff that are like up in the mountains and like their life is like simple, but it's, also fulfilling, I think, because it's really focused on, you know, learning about yourself, discovery, and that wisdom that comes from like trying to really live like a life that's different from what everybody else is doing.
yeah, and it's focused on finding that happiness inside yourself.
Yeah.
Like I mean, there's that old story about the guy in like a fishing town in Mexico or something like that, and he's just sitting on the beach fishing, and a wealthy businessman comes down to Mexico on vacation. He's like, if you want, I can get you a net, and then you can catch a lot more fish. And the Mexican's like, well, why would I want to do that? And he's like, because then you could catch more fish, and then you could get a boat, and you could have a bigger business. And he's like, well, why would I want to do that? And he's like, well, if you got a bigger business and you could hire more people and eventually you can get them to fish for you. And he's like, well, why would I want to do that? Because then you could work for a number of years, you could sell your business, and eventually you could retire at a place like this and hang out on the beach. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing that already. Like, why do I need the rest of that? Why am I going to chase my tail forever?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I sometimes wonder if we've so screwed up our notion of values that it's like most people don't even know what's really worthwhile or what really matters, or even what matters to them. Like because been so reduced to just one thing. And I mean, like I think I mentioned this before. I get there I get money in the sense that like, it's an easy mediary or middle thing because it's like it's always the same. No matter what you're trying to trade, no matter what you're trying to measure, if you put it in terms of money or finances, like it's you can compare it to something else. So like, is my hour worth how much, right? Or like, is this product worth as much as that product? Like you can actually compare it when you put a price on it, and that's understandable. It makes it easy for us to engage with each other, but it's become the only thing that is a mark of anything, and it seems just insane and crazy to do that. I mean, if you think about it, like I've thought about this a lot, right? We have actors who go and portray a character in a movie and they'll make 30 million, but somebody who discovers a new cure for like a disease that's killing people in a horrible way might be lucky if they're making like 100,000 a year, a couple 100,000 a year, or if they're lucky
Or
enough to
let
even like patent it or something, right? Which is rare that even
or like
happens.
an elementary school teacher who
Yeah,
we
yeah,
trust our children with for 8 hours a day, or like a police officer who we entrust our safety with. They're getting $30,000 or $40,000 a year.
yeah. Or we require people to volunteer to fight fires for Christ's sake. Like it's insane,
Yeah.
right? Like we don't even
Hmm.
pay them to do that, and they have to witness all kinds of horrible things. Like it's crazy. So like, yeah, I mean, it's like it's very skewed because, of course, entertainment makes a lot of money. There's a lot of profit there, so I get that. But it's like, is that really? Does that mean success? It shouldn't because that's just talking about a
Well,
market.
it doesn't correlate one to one, and this is I think this is the important takeaway is that they did that study a number of years ago, so the number may be higher, but they found that like yes, money correlates with general well-being and happiness in life up to about $70,000 a year for a family in America. Now that may have changed with inflation, maybe it's $100,000
I'm sure it
a
has,
year,
yeah, yeah,
but
recently, but
yeah, but even so, how many people have way beyond that and they think still they can't
yeah,
like I remember Gary Vaynerchuk was once talking about some dude who was a friend of his and he's like I can't stop I need to get going and he says to the guy he's like you made $100 million on the Facebook IPO like don't bullshit me like if you
yeah,
need to keep going that's on you have enough yeah
yeah. Well, that's just it, though. It's like I think that's the problem is if you only put it in terms of monetary wealth, there's never enough because you can always get more. There's always somebody that's going to have more. There's always somebody who's going to, some breakthrough or whatever, and they're going to have more really quickly. I mean, look at what happened during the pandemic, right? Like, Musk shot up to like number one when he was not even close to that, right? It was just like, boom. And so you're always going to have that. So it's like there's never enough. But you're right. Like at a certain point, every study they found in terms of happiness, it doesn't like, yeah, if you don't have enough money to eat, if your tires going bad on your car can be like a huge crisis because you can't afford to buy them or something, and then you don't have a vehicle, yeah, that money will help you and make you happy because your well-being depends on it. There's so much stress connected to it. But once you can pay your bills and once you can eat and once you can get around, I mean, pretty much it doesn't do much else beyond that. And I think that's the problem we convinced ourselves it does.
Yeah, we think that our value is related to our checkbook or a check
Yeah.
savings account. I think that a really good resource to help kind of get perspective is the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Like every time,
Yeah.
because I've read that once a long time ago, but I just listened to it over and over again. And it's like every time I listen to it, I'm like, man, this guy was so spot on. Like he's the most powerful guy in the world. He's probably the richest guy in the world. He could have anything he
Yeah.
wanted. And he's basically like, we're all gonna die. So, you know.
He reminds you of that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like everything's out of our control. Like it's either by divine providence or random chance, either way out of our control. So we basically just have to try and do the best that we can. And that's it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the best that we can is about being a good person. I mean, he went out and fought with his soldiers like all the time. I mean, like, which is he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do anything. And like he was literally the most powerful person in Rome at the time. I mean, it's about as powerful as you could get. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's amazing to see that, I think. I think that's why I do like reading the philosophers a lot because I think a lot of them, like the Stoics are great examples. You have slaves, you have people who lost everything. They're it's not that their lives were good in the sense that we would necessarily think of them good because they weren't like wealthy, right? They didn't have a ton of money, but they were good because they were doing what they were able to live their best life. And they recognized that their worth was connected to their own well-being, their own skills, their own growth, their own, self-worth tied to what you're capable of doing, not dependent on anyone else, right? We talked about that, what's it within my power and what's outside of my power. It's like I think so many of us are focused on the metrics of our life, our happiness being outside of our control, and that's not a good place to be in because you'll never be happy because there's never an end to it. There's never enough, right? Like I think that's
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's essential focusing on what is in your control because a lot of things are just completely outside of your control. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, I see that all the time with the markets. People are just like, everybody wants to be able to predict what's going to happen, but like the
Yeah.
thing is they're just completely irrational and
Yeah.
they can remain irrational longer than anyone can remain solvent. So it's just like, just got to have fun with it.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because people, I mean, obviously you want to be able to predict it because that would be great. And people get lucky sometimes and stuff. But really, I think it's just like, and everybody wants to make that quick buck too. They don't want to like hold on to it. They want to make it fast. And it's like, I think that's, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
But
crazy.
so here's another thing that I heard or was reminded of this week is the hero's journey. So
No,
basically, like every book, every TV show, every movie, it's basically just like, you know, person decides they want something,
yeah.
stuff falls apart, and then they have to struggle to get it. Like that's the most captivating story. Everybody loves that stuff. Like every Marvel movie, everything is just that same premise. And yet, when it happens to us in life, we're like, why did stuff have to fall apart? Why me? What happened?
Well, I don't have to go somewhere else to get it.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny too. In every hero's journey too, there's always that point of growth, right? There's always the point of like self-realization, of acceptance of the whatever task you've been tasked with, right? And there's always the recognition of growth that you need to grow more to overcome whatever the thing is in front of you. And I think if anything, that should be a sign of worth, is that the growth the self-overcoming we're able to accomplish in our lives, how much we're able to grow as individuals, as people, because that's all we are, right? I mean, we have this small chance to sort of be something. And I mean, it's really what can we make of ourselves in that time?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I keep forgetting what I was gonna say. I think, but
It happens. It's been
it was
busy.
a good point too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it happens. Yeah, it's
yeah,
funny. I think that's one of the things I think, like I said, I mean, I've always liked about philosophy is the emphasis on the good life. And really, so many philosophers to the focus on like what actually really matters. And I think it's something that I didn't notice as much until I think I started teaching, but like when I started like teaching classes, and you really see it when you're interacting with students, like nobody thinks about this. Like what really do you value? What really is worthwhile to you? What really does make your life good? Like what really matters to you and other people? And when you start to really ask those questions, you notice that most people have never thought of them. They've either just assumed whatever society told them is true, whether that's like from family, tradition, whatever. But it's like you need to start there because that's where your happiness, your self-worth is going to be found. It's going to be found in what you really believe is meaningful.
Mm. Yeah, is I think that that's probably part of the hero's journey is finding out what it is. Because I know I've talked about this a few times on the show, how I had to do everything society and my parents said I was supposed
Yeah.
to do. Like I did it all perfectly, and I was miserable. I was like the most miserable person on earth. And then I was like, this isn't what I want from my life. And then I started to like figure out what it was I want. And the more I changed towards the direction I wanted to go, like the better and better my life got.
Yeah, isn't that funny? And it's like it doesn't mean you necessarily like will have more, but it means that like it's your life, right? And that's what matters. And I think
Hmm.
that's the thing we forget too. It's like it's our life. Like, like yeah, money might be helpful, but like is it really worthwhile to kill yourself at a job you hate just to get this paper when you have no time to enjoy it, when you can't do the things that would really make your life worthwhile, right? Like, wouldn't
Hmm.
less be better in that case? And this is like that's the hard part, but it's difficult too because our society tells us all the time, right? That just all that matters is wealth. That's it, nothing else.
Well, there was something really good in I think it's called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. And he said that sometimes you have to do what you have to do while you're working to do what you want to do. And I think that's an important part because a lot of people, they're like, I hate where I am. I'm just going to rage quit my job and then I'm going to start a business that's going to be an instant success. And it's like, that's
Probably not gonna
not
happen.
likely,
Yeah,
not likely,
yeah,
you know? But, while you're doing your job that you hate, start working on that other business because that job that you hate is going to give you so much inspiration to work on that other business. I
yeah.
remember, when I first got out of vet school, I hated my job. And not only that, like my boss as well, just like could not stand the woman. And like I would have to spend like so much time just trying to be like all zen so I wouldn't flip out on her. And uh it it gave me so much inspiration because I was like, I have to do whatever possible so that I never have to do this again. And like
Yeah.
within ethical bounds, of course. But it gave me so much inspiration because I just started any spare moment I had. I was like, I need to get away from this. So yeah, that was good.
Yeah, no, it can be a good motivator, I think. But you're right too. It's also like, recognizing what you have to do still is important sometimes. Like, you can't just abandon everything. I think too, that show, uh, how they built this on Planet Money on NPR is always good because like when you listen to that too, especially people that built small businesses that become successes, you realize like how many years sometimes that it's like this small idea that they keep building upon while they're working, while they're going to school, while they're doing the rest of the things in their life that like it's just this thing that won't leave that they keep working on. And eventually they get that ball rolling enough that like they're ready to like to maybe borrow money and take that jump, right? And do the big step of like, I'm going all in. Like this is the time to do it. But it's interesting because I think it shows that like there's this long process a lot of times that it's not this instant thing. And I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
other problem. Like our society is so focused on like the quick, the instant success, the instant rags to riches stuff that like it's this really like messed up picture of what life really is like and screwed up idea of what's valuable and what matters. Because if you want it really fast, like you said, right? The ethics of it, you'll do things that are horrible in order to make money, right? And then
Yeah.
you got to live with for the rest of your life. And I think that's not for what? For money. Like it's not that important.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm listening to this book now called like How to Master Your Mind. I think it's by Napoleon Hill. If it's not by him, it's by Dale Carnegie, but I think it's by Napoleon Hill. And
I'll have to
it's
check it
crazy.
out.
It's it's really good because he's interviewing yeah, it's definitely by Napoleon Hill. He's interviewing Andrew Carnegie, who was like the
Okay.
wealthiest. He was the Elon Musk of like the 40s 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere around there. Like back when
One
people
of those
still had
decades.
like values and stuff like that. So he's talking all about how uh in order to build wealth, you have to contribute value. Anybody who thinks that they're going to get away taking more than the value they contribute is just short-sighted. But not only that, he talks about like the only reason why he was successful and why Edison was successful and why Ford was successful and all these other people is because they had a burning desire, they had
Yeah.
creative vision, and the one thing that they did that nobody else did is they persisted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like character traits, right? It's having that character where you're not going to stop no matter what, and you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
there. It's funny too. I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about how like they were looking at these company reports from like the 50s and stuff, and how different it is from now. And they're saying like GE, like the biggest company in the 50s, their yearly earnings report, they were bragging about how much they paid in taxes, how much they paid their employees, right? Because that was a sign that they were doing well. Like they were spreading that around, they were contributing, and it's funny that it's shifted so dramatically now.
Yeah,
Everything's
because everybody got an MBA, and then they're like, "How much
yeah,
can I scalp the company for all that it's worth?"
yeah,
That's basically like there's this one book that I'm reading right now by Bill Zarian, and his dad basically just became a multimillionaire from scalping companies. That was basically
yeah.
it. He'd go in there, he'd gut the entire thing, take millions of dollars of profit, and then leave. And
That's all they did. Yeah,
unfortunately, that's what they teach in business school. They're like, how can we cut the bottom line? How can we make more money for shareholders? And it's not exactly in the best interest of everyone. Like I heard another
there's
thing
no
how
like
back in the day,
long-term thinking. Yeah,
yeah, like back in the day when more companies used to give dividends, if you had just invested in companies that gave dividends as opposed to those other companies, or no, it was ones who had a high moral value. I think that was it. Companies that had a high moral value uh, in their documentation that you would have done like 10 times better than the other companies at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because they were paying their employees well. They had people that wanted to stay. They were investing a lot in R&R. They were doing all these, or R&D rather. They were doing all these things to just like have a long-term plan rather than this short-sighted thinking. But I think that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened. And I think you can see this sort of mirrored in the person, right? Because everything's become this short thinking with very minimal ideas of what is a good life and all, without thinking of the whole person, without thinking of the whole life. And I think that's part of our problem.
Well, I mean, it comes back to a great point. Is that so? We have this life here. We're all going to die. We have this life here. Is accumulating green pieces of cloth, is that the sum total of your life? Or is
I
it
hope
like
not.
accumulating experiences and,
Yeah.
adding value to your life and to other people's life? Like what? And that's going to vary from person to person. Some people it is just accumulating green pieces of cloth, and that's how they win. You know,
But I think that's the thing. You have to know yourself. If you want to know your real worth, you have to figure that out yourself, right? So bring
the
it back.
Oracle of
Yeah,
Delphi.
yeah. You have to bring it back yourself. You have to kind of find what makes your life worthwhile, I think, and that's it. And realize that
Uh,
for most of us, it's not going to be one thing. I don't think.
yeah. Yep. And hmm. I always like the mind exercise. Like this is something that I do when I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, is just be like, well, if I was already loaded to where like I never had to worry about money again, what would I do on a day-to-day basis?
That is a
Because
good
everybody's like,
question. It's a
"Oh, I
good
would
thought
go travel
experiment.
the
Yeah.
world. I would go travel the world. I would go surfing every day. I would go do this. I would go party nonstop." And it's like, yeah, you would do that for like 3 months, and then you'd just be sick of it. Like, then what are you
Yeah.
gonna do? You got another 50 years. So like, what are you gonna spend your time doing? And try and do that stuff.
No, it's a good way to think about it. I think that's a good thought experiment because it gets you kind of thinking beyond just that one end that most of us focus on so much. But that's the trick. You got to trick yourself into stop thinking about that as the only end and thinking beyond it. Like what
But we
really
have this,
matters is, yeah,
yeah, we
yeah,
have this false mindset that when I get rich, then I'll be happy.
yeah.
Uh,
But what about all that other time? And what about the person you bring with
why
you when
didn't
you get there?
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
didn't it work for Jim Carrey? Why didn't it work for Will Smith? Why didn't it work for
Yeah.
all these other people? For Elvis, he was
Yeah.
like he was loaded and he was not very happy. So like, yeah, why didn't it work for all
And
these other
super
people?
famous. He had like both
Yeah.
the things that most people are going after, right? He was crazy
Hmm.
famous and super
Yeah.
loaded and not happy.
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
you could say the same thing of a bunch of the Beatles too for most of their lives. Weren't they pretty
Hmm.
miserable too for most of their lives?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And they were like completely loaded and they had everything. Yeah.
And everybody's like, but I would be different. I know
Yeah.
I would be different. But I think
That
Will
would be
Smith
me.
said it best in his biography, where he was like, I always thought that once I had money, then I'd be happy. Then I got more money than I could even use. And I realized that my own misery was due to
Yeah.
myself, not due to lack
Yeah.
of money. And like,
Yeah.
and that's when you have like a real coming to whatever, when you realize that all of your
Coming to
misery and
terms
all
with
of
it.
this
Yeah.
stuff that you're carrying around is not money. You can say it's money while you don't have money, but it's not money. It's just yourself.
Well, I think that's it, that your real work. You have to work on yourself, right? You have to build, if you build yourself in the right way, if you overcome those things, then it doesn't matter. The other stuff won't matter. You'll have it, I think. I think that's the important thing. Because I think that's what
Yeah.
we all want to be happy, right? We all want to be happy. We all want to have a good life. And I think, you know, for most of us, if you look back on your life, most of the things you probably think back on, it's like the greatest achievements of your life is when you've overcome big difficulties in your life. Not necessarily when you made a bunch of money. There might be times of that, but most of it's probably going to be when you overcame really difficult things and had like a character change and started to be a better person. Those are probably going to be the times you think back on and reflect on as being essential to who you are. So I think thinking
Yeah.
that way can be very helpful too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then, and along those same lines, like everybody, whenever bad things happen to people, everybody's always like, "Why me?" But
Yeah.
Jim Rohn was saying, that's just not helpful. And instead, you can start thinking, well, how can I make the most of this? Because I'm pretty sure if you look back over your life and you look at all the difficulties you've got through, you can see that that was like an opportunity for growth, like you mentioned earlier. And it was only because of that obstacle that you were able to grow to get to that next level you needed to. So if you can start to see those obstacles in the beginning as like, oh, this is awesome, this means
Yeah.
something better is coming, then I think, dealing with it would be a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't mean they're going to be easier, but at least makes your mindset correct, right? To deal with it. You're more likely to like not waste time in misery, essentially.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
like that. I think that's good.
Yeah, so I think we're
Good.
good. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully that helps everybody find their real worth, or at least think about it in a different way. Maybe that's important, right? We can get there.
Hmm. It's
Check us
not
out,
just a
ladies.
number.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not. I think
Hmm.
that was probably the most toxic type of thinking we've ever come up with. Is just turning everything into monetary value. It just like ruined it.
Well, it's like it's almost if when you think about it, it's almost comical. Like you would equate your whole value as this complex organism to a number.
Yeah.
Like literally, how do you breathe? How did a sperm and an egg join and form what you are? Like
Yeah.
this
Right.
complex magic. We're speeding through space on this blue green ball through like a vacuum of space, and somehow we can breathe. Like all of that magic, and you're gonna be like, I'm a number.
Yeah. I'm worth this much. That's it. This many green bills. That's all I'm worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of silly, isn't it?
Mhm.
Uh, well, who knows? Hopefully that helps though. We'll be back later this week with another quick fix and then again with another cool liked episode. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. But until then, though, I know you're worth a lot, buddy.
I
Later,
know
Randy.
you're worth a lot too, Danny. Love you, bud.
Love you too.